This is Religion in the News, sponsored by the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis in cooperation with Wish TV.
Good morning and welcome to Religion in the News, celebrating 55 years on the airways here at Wish TV 8. I'm J.R. Ryder. Joining me today is Lori Cobian, Marie Pimentel-Gannon, Carol Sissom, Merlin Gonzalez, and Faith James regret that they cannot be here today. We have a great show for you today as we talk to the interim director of the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Religion in the News. My guest today is the interim director of the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis. Judy Dunson, welcome back to your show.
Thank you, yes. Well, your show too.
It's
our show.
Our show.
That's right.
Well, first of all, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
This is kind of a milestone
It is.
program today. There's a lot going on, but as we know, Religion in the News may not be continuing the way that we're used to.
Right.
And I know that the Federation is going through some changes. We're going to talk about
Right.
some of those here shortly. But first, I have a little short presentation, a little video I'd like to show you. This is on
Okay.
the history of the Church Federation.
Because I wasn't here 100 years ago.
Because you weren't here 100 years ago. Here we go.
On June 7th, 1912, 40 churches gathered at the downtown YMCA to form the Church Federation of Indianapolis. Led by members of the Indianapolis Ministerial Association, Indianapolis founded one of the earliest church federations in the nation and served as a model for other cities. During its early years, the Church Federation was primarily concerned with maintaining public morality by monitoring the enforcement of laws against gambling, prostitution, drinking, corruption, and conducting business on Sundays. For the Indianapolis Ministerial Association, and later the Church Federation, one alarming sign of the decline in public morality was the automobile speed contest to be held on Memorial Day 1912. The Public Morals Committee quickly investigated the Indy 500. Though not racially or religiously diverse at its founding, the history of the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis is a story of moving from exclusiveness to inclusiveness. Over the next 100 years, the Church Federation would expand its membership to include religiously, racially, and ethnically diverse groups. The 1920s brought great social and cultural change, such as women's suffrage, prohibition, flappers, loosening morality, and the growth of big business. In response to such changes, many Hoosiers supported the Ku Klux Klan, which promised to preserve Protestantism and traditional morality and limit the influence of minorities and Catholics. The Church Federation defied this unfortunate trend and in 1920 established a committee on race relations, which included 5 African Americans. The committee organized an annual Race Relations Sunday during which black and white pastors would exchange pulpits. The committee also sought to address discrimination in housing, education, work, and health care.
Wow, what an impact the Church Federation has
Oh,
had
my
on our
goodness.
community.
Almost like watching history today, starting all over again in many ways.
This is true.
Just imagine the Indy 500 might never have happened if we'd have gotten our way.
Could you imagine that?
Something to think about, isn't it?
Well, you know, many of our viewers are not aware of actually what the Church Federation not only does, but what they've done in the past. I mean, that's very influential for pulling our city together, helping during segregation times,
Right.
and assisting in those matters.
And interestingly enough, I just had a call from a local group that is wanting to, again, come around the racial issues as they appear in Indianapolis. And we were commenting in my conversation that we have still been very fortunate in Indianapolis to have not only black leadership but white leadership that have said we're not going to have the turmoil that many cities have because we can work together, we can talk together, and we can help to mold an Indianapolis that is inclusive both racially, gender-wise, and in many other ways, and still be God's voice in the community,
Yes.
even around sensitive issues.
Absolutely. And some of these sensitive issues seem to be coming back.
Full circle
And,
again.
Yeah, and here we go again. So,
Yeah.
well, what's next for the Federation?
Well, that's a good question, and if I'd have thought, I'd have brought my crystal ball, because we really don't know. We have a new executive director pending. In another week, in fact, the week after this is shown, there will be a meeting of a number of judicatory church leaders to interview the prospective candidate, to talk with that person about their image of where the Church Federation ought to go. And then after all those conversations happen, if that's still a comfortable fit, then that person will be presented to the board of directors. Board of directors will interview the candidate, and with anything not going awry, that person shall be on board by probably the middle of July.
So it's actually moving pretty quick.
Maybe pretty quick. It seems like it's slow because the Lilly Endowment helped us to slow down the process, to really examine who the Church Federation is and what we would like it to be, and that we pick the candidate that best fits the Church Federation of today. Dr. Angelique Walker-Smith was the executive director for some 20 years.
Did a great job.
And 20 years can build in a lot of little tight corners and things, and you're going, oh, we're not comfortable if we get outside of those. Oh, no. We're poised to jump into a new future that should be exciting. It's a little scary. My role will be ended fairly soon. It'll be my job to help orient the new executive director to the people, the relationships, things that I can best do for that
Absolutely.
person. And I think it's exciting. I think a new venture is just filled with all sorts of things that can go right.
And that is exciting. And just so our viewers are aware, the Church Federation is not going anywhere, not going away. Just some changes and some
Reshaping a
exploring
little
and
bit,
reshaping
just
with me.
tweaking a little bit. But, that was an intentional decision by the Board of Directors as they looked at finances, looked at programs, looked at the reshaping of the Church Federation at the end of the 100th year celebration, the centennial celebration, and they voted intentionally that the Church Federation will continue into the future.
And that's good news to know. We're going to pick right back up when we come back. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back and talk more about the Federation.
Great. And great clip.
And great clip. Welcome back to Religion in the News. In this segment, we are continuing our discussion with the interim executive director of the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis, Judy Denson. Also joining us on the set are the familiar faces that you've come to know, our host, Carol Sissom, Maria Pimentel-Gannon, and Lori Cobian. Judy, we have another video segment that we're going to show. Right. Church Federation, so, you know.
Go for it.
Have some more things come to light.
Yes.
All right, let's take a look.
In 1922, the Church Federation created a social service department whose main duties were coordinating the social services offered by member churches and helping juvenile and criminal offenders transition back into society. This department would prove essential in the 1930s, when the nation faced the worst depression it had ever seen. The Church Federation worked to help churches and organizations cope with the unprecedented unemployment. The 1940s began with a world at war. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor quickly drew the United States into the conflict as well. Though the Church Federation had advocated peace and international goodwill during the interwar years, with the coming of World War II, the Federation decided to provide a Christian influence on wartime preparations. The Federation supported chaplains and provided religious services for servicemen and war workers. The Church Federation also sought to prevent discrimination during wartime. The Race Relations Committee petitioned the defense industry to hire blacks and whites equally and give everyone access to skilled positions. During the 1940s, the Federation also expanded its diversity, adding Rabbi Israel Chodos as a member of the Race Relations Committee and helping create the Indianapolis Citizens Council, which included the Indianapolis Catholic Diocese and the Jewish Federation in its membership. In the prosperous post-war years, the Church Federation blossomed as well. Starting in the 1950s, the Federation had an active communications department, which at its height produced 5 weekly radio programs and 10 weekly half-hour television programs, including the popular children's show, Time for Timothy. Time for Timothy began broadcasting in 1957, and the Federation continued producing new episodes until 1991. By the 1970s, the show was broadcast in 22 cities besides Indianapolis. The 1950s brought the start of another project for the Federation, as it took a leading role in establishing chaplaincy programs throughout the city. The Church Federation recruited and supervised chaplains for the Indianapolis Police Department, and later for the Sheriff's Office, the Juvenile Court, Boy Scout camps, and several Indianapolis hospitals.
How amazing is that?
Oh, talk about history repeating itself. You know, I'm sitting here listening to that, and of course, we're still doing a lot of those same things. We do clergy badges now. We don't coordinate the chaplains, but we're doing the prayer vigils. We're doing I was fascinated to hear that the Jewish Federation were originally a part of the Church Federation, which may speak to us today on our need to be multicultural, very intentionally, which if we're going to base it in our history. I keep looking this way because Maria is one of our past presidents, so
yes, she
I
is.
look for her approval of what I'm saying in some ways. But there's just so much that they're doing and that we have already done in history. And I think having that clip really helps, because if anyone doubts that there's a need for the Church Federation today, this proves it.
Absolutely.
Because we've gone through another depression, certainly not as bad as the depression of the 30s, but it's been a depression nevertheless, and we're still in that for many people. We still have there's still a role for the churches to play in our community. And you know, I think of my own personal church that I attend. We were struggling with whether or not to pay our housekeeping help $15 an hour versus $12 an hour. And I simply said, if the church can't take the lead in paying a living wage, how in the world can we expect the government, the city of Indianapolis, the retailers, anybody else to do it? And so if the church can take it on, even though it might stretch our budgets, but we've got to be the trendsetter. And you know, their history shows us that the Church Federation has been a trendsetter since its inception.
And you know, and speaking of trendsetters, what would you say, we have a couple minutes here, what would you say is the biggest need or the biggest challenge right now for the Federation, either or?
And that's really kind of a tough call. Even in my short interim period, which I've been here for about a year now, and part of that was in a different role, there are just so many things, and I would be really challenged to pinpoint one thing as being a primary role. I think it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got a piece here, and you've got a piece here, and you got one back there, and it's how you fit them all together, and challenge us to take the resources that we have and spread them not too thinly, but enough so that we can deal with, you know, the fact that we were dealing with returning youth to as citizens that had been incarcerated. That's still an issue we're dealing with. And we struggle with, well, how much resources do we give to that? And I'm convinced it isn't either or, it's and both. And that's the big challenge.
Wow. So
because not all the funds are there to do that.
Sure.
And it does take money. So, you know, every once in a while we pick up the phone or send out the mail and say, hello, we need some financial help. And people's like, well, I gave a long time ago, you know, maybe I'll give again. But it really needs funding. And the funding was there in the early years, but like many ecumenical movements, it's a challenge today to be able to maintain program that is very good, very helpful, and essential when you don't have the resources to do it.
We'll hold that thought because we're going to come back after the break and pick up on how we can help the Federation. And we're also going to hear a little bit from our other hosts.
Do.
So stay tuned. Welcome back to Religion in the News. You know, Judy, in this segment, I think it would be appropriate for us to give some thank yous.
Yeah, indeed.
A lot of people have taken part in our program here, and myself being the current producer would like to thank some of the past producers.
Amen.
We actually had a gentleman by the name of Fred Erickson who actually started the program, I believe it was somewhere around 1959. And then Mike Ahern, which is kind of a household name here in Indianapolis. He shared that role for several years before Dave White took over. I think Dave White holds the record for being the producer the longest.
Okay.
I want to say 22 years, somewhere around there, that he held the mantle. Following Dave White, I want to thank Teresa Weatherby. Teresa Weatherby was also a big part of our program when I came aboard 17 years ago. Boy, time flies when you're having fun.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
a long time. And for the last 5 years, I've had the privilege of sharing in that spot. So it's been a great time being a part of Religion in the News.
Yes.
Now, Carol is our assistant producer. Carol, why don't you share one of your memorable moments with our program?
Well, you know, JR, I have two. I cannot forget the memorable interview in Israel when I was on the line with Moshe and he was a tour director in Israel, and we talked to him
remember that interview.
live from his living room in Jerusalem.
We did a
Wow.
Skype, didn't we?
Amazing.
Yes.
And then, of course, my very, very first show, I came on Religion in the News as a guest. And I'd just written a book about my mother, and I came on with my mother and my pastor, and we talked about healing.
That's exciting. And you've been here now for about 8 years.
Yes.
All right. Well, Lori, I know you're the baby of the bunch, so I'm actually going to go over to Maria. Just kidding. Lori, why don't you share with us one of your memorable moments?
Okay, I as well have two.
Okay.
And one of the first ones is when Carol interviewed me, because she interviewed me for a testimony. And before I left, you and I had started talking,
Yes, we did.
and you had offered me to come in and minister with Religion in the News and be a host, and that's how I got started. And then my second favorite is when my daughter did a praise dance on the show. It was really
remember that.
exciting and really brought the Lord into the atmosphere, and it was phenomenal. So
And she looked like she enjoyed herself. I remember
she
that.
did.
that
She
interview
was
so
fabulous.
well.
Yes.
I think I was even on the show that day.
Yeah, you
Were
might
you here
have
that
Because I
been.
remember her dancing.
Yes, she's like an angel. Love it. Love it.
And very flexible.
Yes, amen.
I need to
Amen.
work on that.
Thank you, JR.
Maria, why don't you share with us one of your memorable moments since you've been a part of the program?
I too started as a guest, and I was interviewed mostly for my role with the Church Federation as president.
And that's many times. you've
And
been on.
yes, that was multiple times. And then when we talked about the possibility of coming and returning as a guest, which was really great. And I remember my first guest because I kept wondering, who should I interview? And my first guest was the Archbishop Joseph Tobin of Indianapolis, which was a big thing to do. He had been in Indianapolis relatively soon prior to the interview, and so it was a good time to interview him, to welcome
Yes.
him to Indianapolis, and to talk about the plans and the vision that he had for the Archdiocese in Indianapolis.
I do remember that interview too. He was a nice man.
Yes,
Yes.
he still is.
He still is? Okay, so I shouldn't put that in past tense then. Well, Judy, let's come back to you, full circle. Federation has done amazing things. It's going to continue. We'll see what happens with Religion in the News, but I
Right.
know that there's some things you wanted to share on your heart on behalf of the Federation.
Right, and 55 years, just think of that. That's a long time. And the beautiful part was that it was a gift to the city from Wish TV 8.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
we never had to pay for producing a show.
Absolutely.
We never had to pay for all that goes into making sure a program like this gets on the air. In fact, as I understand it, we have been the longest running
Faith-based
religion
program.
show
That's
on public television, or not public, in public,
The networks.
the
Here,
networks and things
absolutely.
like that. Get it out there
Absolutely.
pretty soon. But it's just really marvelous. And your role as the producer and lead host, Carol, you've brought so much life to the program. And
To that.
appreciate that. Lori, your youthfulness, and I say that relatively, as you said, you're the baby on here, but the enthusiasm that you bring to the show has brought a lot of spark. And then, of course, Maria and I have gone back a few years, not as long as I have with some other folks, but certainly related to this program. I've known Maria for at least a couple of years, if not longer. And the sensibility that she brings to the program, the groundedness, you're down to earth, and you know the people with whom you're speaking and you're talking about. And, I'm sorry Merlin can't be here.
Yes.
Because he also brings a spark of his enthusiasm. The Faith, Hope, and Love ministry that he
Yes.
serves just exudes itself onto this program when he does the interviewing. So it's, what else can one say other than thank you? And we thank Channel 8, Les Van, the station manager. He has made the commitment to be sure that we're on the air, even though Channel 8 could no longer produce the program. And we've certainly been grateful to the production team here, and because they picked up where we could not have gone any place.
Absolutely.
And even though we now find ourselves in a position of where we're having to say, oh, wasn't free anymore, and what do you do? And God's got something in mind.
He does.
God's got something in mind. Tina Cosby, the Community Affairs Director. I've known Tina for a number of years when I was on the staff at Church World Service with the Crop Hunger Walks. Tina was one of my first contacts in the city among the media to give me a sense of what did it mean to come on a TV program and to talk a little bit about what was passionate in my heart. And Alan Hall. Yes. Now, I don't know who Alan Hall is.
Alan is basically Tina Cosby's right-hand man. They work together in the Community Affairs Department. Becky Hardy and the production team. There's several of them over there. And
so thank you. I'd say that 55 times, but we don't have the time for that. And JR, you've just been the spark that's kind of the glue that's held it all together.
Yes.
Amen.
Yep.
Thank you, Judy. Really, really appreciate that. I know we're running out of time, and I'd just like to thank all of the hosts, all the past hosts. Jeffrey Payne, who's been a big part of this, Reggie Barney. We had Julie Rupert, Kiara Davis, Nick Alexander, Gabriel Campo, Charity McHugh, David Carrillo, because you remember David, yes. Bridget Ayers, and so many others. We missed you. We thank you for being a part of our program. Well, that's it for today's Religion in the News. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to know more information about the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis and how you can be a part of that, visit www.indyfaith.org. That's www.indyfaith.org.